mean, we're on episode, was like 13, and this is what Europe looks like? Not on my watch. So we're going to pace it a little bit better. The Russians and the Baltic states are going to explore this little excursion of unexplored land, and eventually they're going to get up here to St. Petersburg and Finland. We see Denmark, in partnering with France, is going to go up here and discover a lot of the Nordic areas. But the French aid was definitely a lot more focused over here in the British Isles, where they are going to be discovering a lot of northern England. They attempt to go northern in Scotland, but there are a lot of mountains. But, eventually the mountains will succumb to exploration. Very specific and small envoys are going to be sent into the Nordics, and this is mainly because this area, like I said, in Scotland is very mountainous, but eventually it would become explored at one point, and at this point, the entire basic, Norwegian area is going to be explored. Sorry if that sentence was not very well put together. But next, we're going to see the Danish go through a little bit of a policy shift. Their king down here in the capital is going to get assassinated. Yeah, wow, yep. He's dead. And in his place is going to be his tyrannical son. His tyrannical son is going to put people to work in discovering and conquering the Nordics. This is mainly why we saw they were able to be discovered so fast, but now we're going to see subsequently how that leads to more conquering. And at this point, their empire in the Nordics is absolutely massive. They're going to move west and colonize the western coast of Norway, and we see them conquering the eastern area of Sweden and both of these islands. Now, if you have this and that, people there no like that. So people there no like that, they say they no like that. In summary, with intelligible English, they are going to rebel away. The Norwegians are going to rebel away. These two rebellion pockets might be a little bit different in their policies and kind of, outskirts of their influence. Maybe they have different opinions on how that should go. But once they link up, they are able to kind of congeal their ideas into one and make it into a commonality that they can use against the Danish. So with Norway breaking away, we see Sweden breaking away as well. Now, the king is shocked for some reason. He's like, whoa, you guys are supposed to love me. You're like, I'm tyrannical and I help the country. But, no one likes you. Everybody point and laugh at the king. No one likes the king. We're going to see another rebellion outbreak down here in the south. And at this point, Danish envoys are being sent back to the peninsula because they just can't handle this. And eventually, the division of the Nordic peninsula can begin and also end, subsequently with it looking like this. And these are kind of just where borders met, so now we can actually take a look at where the borders are going to be officially. And this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. Disgusting. As you can see, the Danish really left these guys to their own devices, as they have now elected local towns and areas to kind of vote whether they want to be a part of the new nation. Of course, more counties over here will want to be a part of Sweden, but then maybe there are some towns that are owned by some wealthy people that want to be a part of Sweden, maybe because of tax rates or something like that. And maybe they wanted that instead of being with the Norwegian country, so instead they were kind of just opted to join the Swedish country, which if you have enough money, you are able to do. And that is kind of the case with all of these areas. But at this point, there are no major cities apparently. This is why I need to update this map in a new live stream I'm going to be doing. So let's just spawn one for each nation. And of those 3 major cities, all 3 will be upgraded into capitals. Alright, now we have Sweden, South Sweden, and Norway. So immediately Norway is going to kind of fix this situation by just doing that. But once they do that, Sweden is going to do this. And then Norway, oh my god. This is so cursed, holy hell. I mean, from now on, the border should look fine. It's just these countries had a lot of conflicting ideals. But these guys are a little sad because, they're down here and they can't expand anywhere. So here's what they're gonna do. The king, he has a son. And that son is gonna go down here to these areas. He doesn't like his father. He wants to establish a new nation under his own jurisdiction. But then the father convinces him to claim the land for his nation, and in return, he will love him. And the son, it's really sad, and the son just kind of relinquishes all of his potential for his father's love. And now southern Sweden has a little bit of a colony over here in Poland. This South Teal Germany country is going to expand over now bordering this area, so is the Baltic country. And that is kind of just to get a little bit more of a trade network going. But we also see Red France coming in here, and they're going to take some territory. And Denmark's like, no, we want this territory. The tyrannical king is still here, by the way. Also, I think Europe has a little bit too much red, so I'm going to change these guys' color. If I do that, it looks disgusting. Alright, you know what? that works. But like I said earlier, the Danish king was still tyrannical and still very power hungry, so he's going to send his envoys on a very long grueling journey over here to Scotland. And they're going to make a landing. Eventually, they do claim this for the Danish crown, and the French are like, yeah, no, we're actually going to take more of Wales. And then eventually it just turns into a scramble for the British Isles. Eventually, the Western French are going to get this. I guess the Beneluxians are going to get this territory, and the Danish will get the rest. We also see the Irish claiming the rest of Ireland, and we also see Augusto fixing these borders because they're horrendous. Alright, that looks a bit better. But now with the British Isles being divided up, actually kind of ironically among foreign powers, we're going to see Central Europe. It's time to get discovered and conquered. And when I say discovered, you're like, Augusto, all this area is discovered. It is not! So Italian envoys are just going to, yeah, that's good. And now we are going to see a council of representatives from the Italian, Catalonian, French, Beneluxian, and German country. They're all going to come to a consensus, and that consensus is going to be reached in the capital of the Red French country. And that consensus is going to be each country's claims over Europe. The Catalonians, they speak first because they're like the border state of Europe. Everyone is okay with them getting this, but they're also just going to work out a border with the French country. This does not have any lore. This is just me realizing the borders are really bad. Alright, and speaking of the French country, they're going to get a big old amount of territory. No one opposes this. The French are going to make their claim over here in these areas. The Germans are going to make their claim looking along the lines of this. And the Romans, they are going to take this territory. So if we color that in, it goes from this to this. Now, you might see something wrong. What the hell is this? Well, the European representatives are just going to turn into a new country. It's awful. It's bad. Why would you even do that to a country? It's like politically, they're not going to be okay. But this new country needs a capital, which will go right here. And yeah, Europe. Down over here in Croatia, they're going to start expanding, but I guess they kind of broke away for anti-expansionists type government, so what are you going to do? The Romans take a little bit of territory, looking along the lines of this. But the country taking the most amount of territory is going to be this dark green one. They're just going to go ahead and just take all of this. I'm sure they'll be able to hold on to this in the future. Don't worry about it. Sorry, I'm very indecisive. But going over here, the Danube country. If you remember, they were very fixated on encompassing the entire Danube. And eventually they were like, alright, if we keep expanding, we're going to collapse. But now that's not really too much of an issue. So they're starting to branch out along the rivers. Until eventually they look like this. The Germans are just going to go ahead and go into here. But we actually see a rebellion occurring in the Baltic country, and that's going to form a Polish country. Now, this wasn't really more of a violent, bloodsheddy revolution, more as to like a country that was just kind of easing away from the Baltics, and they just decided to split, and they will take the remainder of this territory. And yeah, now we have Europe looking a little something like this, at least the western area, because the eastern area is still pretty, not filled in. There are definitely going to be missions to send people to discover this area, but no one really has any interest in claiming it. But wait, the Baltic country says they want to do something. What do you want to do, little guy? Oh, you say you worked out a treaty with Russia. How's that gonna look? Aw, such a cutie. Holy hell, you got massive. Well, it turns out no one really wants this territory, so if with no opposition, then you can just go ahead and take it. And the Baltic country really took that to a T. But going over here from Europe, we are now going to go over here to Central Asia. We see a group of people is going to go down here and just kind of pierce into the Himalayas. And everyone's like, whoa, holy guacamole, how do you do that? He's so cool. And then they're going to establish their own country. The pinnacle of coolness. Eventually, Himalaya go bye-bye. And these guys become big. How big? That big. Alright, new underscore country. And now people are like, okay, this area can't be too hard to discover. And then they go in. And actually, this is a little bit of my fault because I realized that this area is not a part of the Himalayas. The Himalayas are like this. And this area is like not a part of the Himalayas. So, bada boom, bada bam. And with the Himalayas shrinking increasingly, they're just gonna go ahead and die. Humanity has enough technology to assume that with like wind currents, there are no lakes here. And eventually they're able to expand their knowledge about it. And eventually that leads to white. A lot of countries are going to take this and they're going to be like, whoa, we can expand now. So a lot of these Mongolian states are going to expand. And I might be a little bit counterintuitive from their existence because the Mongol states, the big Mongol state was very expansionist. And these guys broke away because of that, but old habits never die. These guys are going to expand the most. They expand like a freaking lot. The red team is going to go ahead and just expand a lot as well. And you might be, Augusto, why aren't they expanding towards China? That's because China want land too. And boom, Yep, China big China. The Lime team is going to be next to submit a claim, and also, these claims aren't really happening with like a consensus of everybody, they're just kind of happening. But the South Chinese pink team will claim this. The North purple team, like north of the pink team, they take this! Bangladesh, with a lot of support from India, is just going to go ahead and expand their borders massively. Ah yes, the red team. What do they do now? Well, of course they're going to take territory, but surprisingly little amount of territory. Purple team takes territory as well, but once again, a very surprisingly small amount of territory. And yeah, Afghanistan's actually going to take a lot of territory. Now, actually, I'm really bad at geography, and I just realized this is Persia, so Persia takes this. And yeah, a general consensus among nations has been reached that we just want the world to become more explored. Holy. And everyone is going to be pursuing that consensus majorly. These guys will be expanding over to their northeast because they realize that these people are expanding here, but now they've kind of reached their limit on expansion because they got really big really quickly. They're going to put their capital here so it can be very close to the economic prosperity of Kazakhstan. And yeah, now we have very small white here. We see the entire Kola Peninsula is discovered along with Finland, and Russian envoys are going to be sent into, well, the Russian tundra. I assume all of this area has a pretty similar climate to each other, so it shouldn't be too difficult if humanity already kind of has the technology to go into these areas. But Hokkaido is going to work on discovering the areas of Kamchatka, and eventually they're able to expand their claim tenfold. No, it's more like 2 or 5-fold. And eventually their colony becomes so big that it is producing a lot of economic output. And what you do with economic output, you grow country. So, like I said a little earlier in the series, that this area, the northern area here, was developed by Korea, and the south area was developed by China. China and Korea had very different policies than they do now, but back then, the Koreans were more hell-bent on expansion, and the Chinese were more hell-bent on development. So, these guys, not really being liked by their neighbors, they're just gonna get pummeled. And yeah, yeah. So Hokkaido is just going to absolutely demolish these areas. And their military is very strong to the point where Japan is forced to surrender. And this capital, by the looks of what I'm doing, is not going to be very good for northern Japan. So now we can see their demise. Alright, this is what our peace treaty looks like. And I don't think you can really see this line. But, yep. And actually, I kind of like the troop color of Japan better, so we're just going to go ahead and switch it a little bit, so it's just a little bit lighter. We're actually going to be starting out over here in Western Africa. The Carthaginians are getting very good at naval exploration. It's to the point where they're even able to discover a couple of these islands very far away, the furthest away being this one and this little archipelago here. This is the furthest west a country has ever gone in our civilization series. And at this point, the countries can travel pretty long distances. For example, Somalia, if they really wanted to, could go from this island all the way to the red team. So that's just to kind of show how much the naval stuff has developed. But Carthage is going to continue to expand down Morocco, and eventually they're going to get to this little peninsula right here where they're going to stop. And they stop because of a little someone named Rome. Rome, if you remember in the last episode, was very mad at Carthage. Or maybe that was 2 episodes ago. It was either in episode 12 or 13, when the Albanian country and the Greek country went to war, and the Roman country took a little bit of a foothold over here in northeastern Corsica. Eventually, there was a rebellion in Corsica and Sardinia that encompassed both of the islands. But Carthage, being a generic ally of Greece, was able to take down the rebellion, and as the rebellion had inherited this little northeastern area, basically Rome is saying that Carthage stole their territory by full annexation of Corsica. So they're going to go to war over it. Rome's war vessels are going to appear on the coast of Carthage, and they are going to unleash hell. They make an ambiguous landing in the east, and eventually they encompass the north of the island, taking a little bit more than their previous claims. Now, there are a lot of people that are mad at Rome for this because, first of all, they went beyond their previous claims and the stuff they were arguing about. And second, you're fighting against one of the strongest naval powers, and if you're a naval power, that means that you encompass a lot of the trade. And if you encompass a lot of the trade and a certain someone is disrupting it, then a lot of countries are going to be mad at that certain somebody. So as Rome is fully invading the entire island of Corsica, they make plans to set south to Carthage. But Carthage, they have a couple of allies, and those allies are going to be represented in the official formation of an alliance, the alliance of which being the Circle Alliance. This is an official military alliance that they are going to sign with a couple of countries, those countries being Croatia, Catalonia, and finally, of course, Greece. If you look at the major cities, I still really need to update this. I'm probably going to do another live stream maybe sometime in the coming weeks. But going away from that, we're going to see Rome is going to have a lot of their forces fixated here in Croatia. They're easily able to take out this peninsula, and they're going to start to move out from their entire border. We see Rome is going to bombard the coast of Greece, and fighting ensues on the French front line with the Catalonians. Now Rome, they might look like they're actually winning, but their army is depleting fast. But that is not going to stop Rome from using all of them up, as they are going to push with brute force into the countryside of Catalonia and further down the coast of Croatia. Now, this isn't a war about trade anymore. That justification for war has been long behind them. This is now a war to protect common interests among powers and try and limitate the powers that are radical and trying to take you out. So with this idea in mind, we're going to see mercenaries from the Carthaginian capital sign up in droves. They're split into two groups, both of which are going to be sent here into Sicily, but one in the west and one in the east. The one in the west is going to be very docile, using modern military tactics, and the other one is going to be absolutely, well, actually pretty much like the Roman army, just kind of throwing your men at the front line. And eventually, with these two generals and mercenary groups combined, they're able to take out Sicily and make a landing in the boot. This is going to prompt Greece to arm up their entire navy, and they're going to be able to make a very small landing here. And eventually, Rome is going to call their ally into the war, Albania. Now, Albania isn't the strongest of countries, but they're definitely, they're going to try. They send a couple of their divisions into here and maybe some down the coast, and they're actually doing kind of good. But then Greece primarily fixates a lot of their forces here, which means they can go back here and then just absolutely demolish them. And yeah, this is not looking good for Rome. But this is a pretty good distraction for the Circle Alliance, as now Rome is able to properly go up against this front line, but a very small naval area is going to hold out. But Rome is going to continue to pummel the Croatians into the ground. And they're now even able to start to attempt to capture their capital. But Catalonia has just received foreign aid from the western areas of Carthage, which kind of acts, interestingly, semi-autonomous from the east. It's a little bit complex, but the king over here is going to decide to send the Catalonians some aid, and once this aid arrives in the front line, they're going to be able to push back the Romans majorly. And Corsica, it's a long stalemate naval-wise, but they're finally able to make a landing down here in the south and liberate the entire island. And this is when it all comes crashing down for Rome. We see with foreign aid supplied to Croatia from a foreign power who will not be named, they will be able to push back the Romans, and eventually the Romans are going to be forced to evacuate their entire front line. And Rome didn't order this. They did not order for the entire front line to, capitulate. In fact, it's so bad that Croatia's own militias are starting to advance into your territory. Now, why is that happening? Ah, yeah, that makes sense. So, a little bit of an interesting story. Remember when Europe got divided in the last episode? Well, let me tell you something. All of these countries over here, they did it peacefully. They went into the land and they went to the locals and they were like, hey, you want to join? We'll give you a whole bunch of benefits. And the locals were like, yeah, sure. Under jurisdiction, we're happy. But when Rome tried to do this, they went north, and these people who were native to this area did not really want to be under a society that's classified as a country. So instead of actually trying to break away and abandon the country aspect, they are going to try and form their own country, because they realize that under their own jurisdiction they can do whatever the hell they want. So these pockets are all going to be in agreement of their policies that they want to ensue after the war, because they know that Rome has been bled dry. Carthage mercenaries are going to begin to go up the rest of the boot. The docile military general is left to occupy and assimilate Sicily, while the radical one is being sent up here. Eventually, Albania just willingly dies. And with this, a lot of forces can be reallocated from the Albanian area over here to Italy, where Greece is able to meet Carthage halfway. And interestingly enough, after the Catalonians are finished pushing out the Romans from the front line, Rome is going to surrender to the rebellion. I guess this was kind of their way of saying, hey, you haven't defeated us because we surrendered to the rebellion, ha ha ha, but they still lost, so yeah. Now we can take a look at this peace treaty. And this is what we see our peace treaty looking like, at least the lines that are comprising our peace treaty. So let's break it down. The Catalonians are going to gain this western territory. The Croatians gain territory east of this line. And speaking of this line, it outlines a brand new country, being this country, I guess. And I think I might actually change their color because France has a very, same color. Alright, I'm just going to return France to their original color. And I think that works it out well. Greece is going to acquire these territories from Albania and this territory from Italy, while Carthage is going to gain the island of Sicily and the southwestern boot. And that's it. Rome is now in shambles. And if you're wondering, yes, this was not like a coalition or anything like that. This is mainly just a, I guess, military defensive pact. But for these brand new guys, they're going to put their jurisdictional capital right here. And boom, new North Italian country. And these guys, the Circle Alliance is technically an attack one, attack all alliance. So they are a military alliance. But mainly it is also a economic alliance. And I guess you could call it like the Mediterranean order. But do you even remember what we were doing before the invasion of Rome? The entire reason Carthage had to pause an entire project, it was them moving down the coast of West Africa. So they're going to continue doing that. Eventually nationality is going to sweep through all of the people, and eventually that is going to lead to a lot of push for their colonization department. And that is going to go as well as you think it would. Very well. Their country goes down very far the North African coast, getting over here to Mauritania. And they even have the influential reach to take these islands. And now at this point, Carthaginians are going to be signing up in droves to go down here for the time of the time of a lifetime. But generically, I'm not actually quite... Jeez, I need to get a new keyboard. Because whenever I don't click my control button hard enough, it just goes... So I will be trying to fix that in the future, but... These people are going to work to expand the territories of Carthage, and they now look like this. Yeah, Carthage is really strong. Speaking of strength, I updated the top 10 strongest countries list. The actual placements of each country didn't change, it's just the numbers are now on the actual country, and we might actually need to update this. First of all, blue team, bye-bye. And you might be wondering, why is the blue team getting kicked out of the top 10 place? This is because the previous 9th strongest country is going to be replaced, and they are now going to take the place of 10. Now, wait a minute. If there's no 10 because the blue team was kicked out, and these guys were 9, but they're now 10, then who's number 9? Ah, see, Carthage is number 9. Alright, so let me just list off the top 10 most powerful countries. In this order, it goes red team at number 1, Egypt at number 2, China at number 3, Russia at number 4, Anatolia at number 5, number 6 goes to Burma, 7 goes to Korea, 8 goes to Catalonia, 9 goes to Carthage, and 10 goes to Western Arabia. And yeah, that is just kind of a quick recap on the top 10 strongest countries, but now we can kind of see a little event happen. What the hell? Before I was rudely interrupted, I was just going to say that we see something happening in Russia, and that is their continued expansion into Eastern Europe. And at this point, a lot of countries are starting to take notice of Russia's expansion here, and they are going to want some of that land for themselves. The first country to act upon this ideal is going to be Poland. They are going to take this territory, and yeah, it's pretty reasonable. The Danube country is going to take this territory. It's not specifically on the Danube, I believe. Well, some of it's on the Danube, but not enough of it. Now we see Eastern Romania will be getting these territories. I lied, they're actually going to be getting these territories. The Baltic states are going to be getting these territories. And I need to fix this because it's horrendous. And yeah, with all of these countries coming to a consensus, they take these territories. And Russia can now begin to, I guess, take all of these eastern areas of these bordering states. Because Russia is starting to migrate to Russia. They go up here to this peninsula here, and they start to kind of, I guess, wrap around these lakes. And they even start to incursion into Finland. And this territory is pretty far away from your capital. What do you, why is it all the way over here? That was a trick question. It's not over there anymore. That's right, the Russians, they have officially moved their capital so their capital can be more centralized around all their territory. And this proves to be vital now as these areas are majorly Russian. Now these areas, with the capital being over here, can easily assimilate to Russian culture. Next, going up here, these Norwegian and Nordic countries, they have become a lot stronger since the last episode. And they're now going to be able to divide up the Nordic peninsula. Norway gets this, Sweden will be getting this, a brand new state will be created in Finland. They will look like this. The Baltic states will be extending their borders up to here, and Russia will be expanding theirs to here. And yeah, that is the entirety of continental Europe being filled in. Now if you're wondering why Finland was made, it was mostly just to be a buffer state. But, yep, there you go, they have a capital now. And now Europe is completely filled in. But now we are going to be seeing a monumentous occasion occur. It is going to be the discovery of new land. Land far beyond comprehension that is known behold to us. And that is because of an accident. The French are going to attempt to send a boat over here to the northwestern tip of Galicia. Their trajectory was to look a little something like this. But eventually a cyclone, as they are right over here, it is going to send them way out of trajectory, and they're going to end up over here. The leader of the boat had the name of Axel Arn, and Axel Arn's crew is going to have to venture out here into the unknown. Eventually, as Axel's crew is completely starved of all of their food and everything, it looks like they're gonna die. But that is when they are mere miles away from the coast. And that is when a disease is going to break out on the ship. Now, evidently, the disease is going to break out right as they hit the coast, and they are going to discover the surrounding areas. The sick people are going to be abandoned on the ship, which is lit on fire, so no diseases can spread to this new land. Oxel Arn and his remaining healthy crew, who I am confirming they are healthy, they are going to discover more of the territory here in North Carolina, and if you know, this is the Americas. But right now, they think that they're like somewhere in this area. So if everyone knew that the Philippines existed, then they would probably think that they're in the Philippines. But eventually, the southern Chinese are going to land in the Philippines, and the climate is drastically different. The Philippines, being more warm and humid, is not comparable to North Carolina, whose climate is a lot more not warm and humid. And then these people realized they're not on a known piece of land. In fact, this entire land is unknown. It's all gray, see? So Oxel is going to go back to France, kind of abandoning his crew, not really. He informs the king there's a brand new continent full of luscious land and resources to be upheld. The French king is like, and evidently, France is going to disclose this information outside of their borders. So, like, you know, the Benelux country doesn't know, not even their own trading ally doesn't even know. And eventually, France is going to establish the first colony in the Americas. But this is when someone from the original crew who was abandoned is going to be brought back to France, and he is going to make the news public. This is sort of just to spite France, and eventually the entire continent is aware of the new continent. And that is when multiple ships are going to be sent over, and we see Portugal is going to make the second landing in the Americas, being over here in Hispaniola. Eventually they discover the entire island, and then a couple more islands. They get over here to the Bahamian archipelago, and discover Cuba and Jamaica. Portugal is going to establish their first colony here in Puerto Rico, and on the eastern side of Hispaniola. This is when their exploration forces move up, but Galicia is going to make the second landing in North America. Well, now, yes, they've been in North America this entire time, but I would classify this as like the actual physical landmass of it, and they're going to land in southeastern Florida. Eventually, they establish a very nice home base, and the Galicians are going to expand upwards, colonizing the entire Bahamian archipelago, and they are going to make the second official colony on the official landmass of the Americas. Eventually, these guys, they're going to make it their, goal to link up since, like I said, they are trading partners. But there are definitely tensions as the French did disclose this information from Portugal. But the French colony is going to expand down the coast of the Carolinas. And Galicia is going to continue their colony here in Florida, and it flourishes very nicely. More envoys from the French colony are going to be sent up here into the kind of like Delmarva Peninsula, northeastern areas. And eventually, another ship is going to claim New Jersey for France. This landing in New Jersey points pivotal as now it sees as a sort of one-up of the Galicians, because now we have 2 colonies, but this is probably comprised of like 10 colonies, so maybe they're not outmatching the Galicians, but I'm not really sure if it's a competition. But eventually these 2 colonies are going to link up, and after that the colonization fund is going to go way down because this is dangerous work and nobody really wants to do it. So this is what we see the Americas are left to. Going over here to Eastern Asia, though, I know that was like a big transition. We were in the Americas, and now we're in Eastern Asia. But I hate to break it to you, we're in Eastern Asia now. And like in the past episodes, many times you have seen, these countries are just going to go ahead and make claims in empty territory, with these guys taking this territory. We see these guys are going to take a lot of territory out here to their east. The dark red team is going to take minimal territory because they are starting to get quite long. And these guys are really long, so someone ought to stop them, and that is just going to be Sakhalin, who establishes their claim here. Oh, and this color corresponding, it doesn't work. I think it's a very subtle change, but it does help it a lot. And now the Sakhalin country is going to continue their eastward expansion, now getting over here towards the colony of Hokkaido. And Hokkaido is going to expand it a little bit, but not really too much. It's pretty insignificant. But now going over here to Libya, they're going to expand further into the Sahara. This is kind of natural as technology expands and becomes more accessible. Then the Libyans are going to be able to use it more. But that just also means the Carthaginians can use it too, so they expand a lot. And yeah, North Africa is developing very quickly. So first, I'm going to be starting over here in the Carthaginian country. They have been on the rise, as you can see, with their number 9 rank. And that is going to continue to be evident as they are going to continue their conquest of Western Africa. But there is a rising faction inside of the Carthaginian country that is very anti-expansionist and a little bit more people-oriented. So as Carthage is expanding into the Numidian areas, which this faction deems useless, a rebellion is going to break out inside of Carthage. And these guys are funded by a foreign nation. This nation is top 10 powers, so you can see here are the top 10 powers. So it could be like Egypt, Western Arabia, Anatolia, the red team, you get it. But the rebellion is going to take place primarily in the areas that have recently been conquered. The rebellion is going to gain a lot of support also by the Moroccan areas. And at this point, the Carthaginian infantry is going to be forced to reallocate from the south back up to the homeland. The entire south of the nation is going to fall, as well as these recently annexed islands. And if you're wondering what did trigger this event, it was a whole bunch of delegates from Rome. So this is kind of planned by Rome, but the Romans are not funding them. That is because I did say that Rome is not a top 10 power, and the guys that are funding this rebellion are a top 10 power. But the Carthaginians are going to start to get a little bit scared as they take the Strait of Gibraltar, and they are now enclosing on a major settlement of the Carthaginians. But things are going to go even worse for the Carthaginians. We see Numidia is going to break away from Carthage. These people were very independent, and the sense that they were taken over by Carthage didn't really set well with them. So they are now teaming up with the Moroccan rebels to try and take out Carthage's stronghold over here in the Mediterranean. The Moroccans are going to get very close to this major city, while the Numidians, protecting their own common interest, are going to spearhead towards the Mediterranean. And it is at this point where the Carthaginians are going to start to become desperate. Rome is going to reinvade the boot, including Sicily, and their northeastern settlement, while we see the rest of it being taken out by Catalonia. And as this major settlement falls, the Carthaginians have no choice but to surrender over to the rebellions and abide by their treaties. So now we can take a look at what that treaty is going to look like. And this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. Starting over here in Morocco, we see the rebellion getting their independence. We see Numidia getting their independence. We see Rome taking the rest of the boot and Sicily, as well as their northeastern area, kind of the reason of their downfall. And the Catalonians are going to take these two islands. And yeah, now we have the fall of Carthage. Numidia's capital is going to be right here, while Morocco's is going to be in the Strait of Gibraltar. And yeah, the Carthaginians have fallen far from their number 9 spot, and we are going to have to revise the top 10 ranking a little bit. And I think all we really need is a new number 9, and that number 9 would logically be the Western Arabian country. And now number 10 would be given back to the blue country. Alright, so this is now what we have our top 10 strongest countries looking like, and yeah, that's a major development. But now we're going to be going over here to Germany, and this is where we see a rebellion breaking out. This is going to be a rebellion that shares ideals with each other while being in different nations. This rebellion is going to break out over here in the northeastern areas of Germany, but it's also going to break out over here in northwestern Poland. Now, I am going to color them different, but this is just to retain the borders. This is that's still the same rebellion, but it's also going to be encompassing over here in this little South Swedish colony, and these guys are going to be very successful in their endeavors over here in the Prussian areas. And yeah, there's not really much Germany and Poland can do about this since they are still relatively juvenile countries. And they are going to have to, I guess, kind of bend over to these guys. Really gotta watch my language, jeez. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. The Solidaro Rebellion does gain its independence, and its capital will be placed here. So yeah, now we have Prussia, I guess. Adds a little bit of spice to our European map, if I do say so myself. But now we're going to be going back over here to the Americas. And it's not for expansion of a, active colonizing power. A new country is going to be landing in the Americas. Actually, we have 2 countries now landing in the Americas. One of them is landing up here in Newfoundland. At least I think that's what it's called. If it's not called Newfoundland, then just they land in Canada. But the other one will land in Trinidad and Tobago, also in the areas of Guyana. Sorry, my voice is not working throughout this video, I don't know why. But if you haven't guessed already, it's going to be the Benelux country and the Catalonians. Now, these are pretty major developments as these are 2 relatively strong powers inside of Europe landing in an unknown land. An unknown land where there's a lot of opportunity to become stronger than you already are, of course being a European power. The Beneluxians and the French are already really close, so colonial collaboration won't be too much of an outside idea to them. We see a big push in the colonization fund being reached, and the French are now able to move up here into Massachusetts and Maine. The Benelux country is going to expand their claim over here in the southeastern areas of Canada, and the French are going to now border them. Once again, like I said, these guys have pretty tight relations in Europe, but how is Catalonia going to interact with these guys? Portugal, Jesus. well, the rest of these islands are going to be discovered, and at the exact same time split up between the Portuguese and the Catalonians. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how these guys are going to start to abide by their own culture, maybe a kind of like separate one. Speaking of culture, I need to do another live stream. This is a very old religion map. But going away from my to-do list, we are going to see the Catalonians are going to discover more of the northern coast of South America, getting over to Panama. Of course, you do have the Darien Gap and the Amazon rainforest, but you can just keep going down the coast because that would relatively be a lot easier than this mess. So the Catalonians, they're now going to expand their claims here in Venezuela, now getting over to the Colombian areas. They do send some people to push into the Amazon, yet it does deem to be unsuccessful as they do not get very far. And the land that they're colonizing right now is not very valuable, so, you know, what's the point of colonizing if the land doesn't benefit you? But they're not really asking themselves that question. We see the French and the lowland country, they're going to work together to go up here into Quebec, and a big push is going to be made into Ontario. Contact is made with the Hudson Bay, and both countries will begin to expand their colonies. And France's primary focus is going to be over here in Ontario, and they even do this so they can cut off the The Benelux are going to expand along the border of the French, now reaching more into Quebec. Ooh, but now the Galicians. They're going to continue their colonization over here in the Caribbean, and they do manage to gain the entire thing. They move their forces into the Floridian Panhandle and into Louisiana, going down the coastline of Texas. They're going to be the main perpetrators to North American expansion, as if you see on the river map, there are a lot of river networks that are going through here, so it would be in their interest to try and discover these areas, and that is going to go very well. They expand their colony around the Carolinas and down to Louisiana, and the Americas are now being discovered a healthy amount. But if I look at a map of the 1600s, or like just kind of around the area when time and the borders looked like this, kind of, this looked a lot different in real life. So let's fix that. First of all, yeah, humanity has had the technology to go up into Siberia, but some people are actually starting to do it. So Siberia is now completely discovered. But Russia, oh Russia, they're going to do some expansion, I'm telling you right now. They're going to push their territory all the way out east as far as they can, and they become massively large. And the reason they're able to do this so quick is because there's never really a regional competition for Russia. You know, you have Kazakhstan, but it's not like Kazakhstan's going to go up here and like do this. So Russia is kind of like the only nation on this world that's like has ambitions for Russia. You could argue that Hokkaido and Sakhalin do have some interest here. We will get to that in a second though. That's because Russia is doing some pretty massive expansion, and at the end of it, they are going to look like this. But we do also see some other countries doing expansion. We see Kazakhstan now moving around the border of the Russian country. Remember the Kazakhs, they did abandon the Russians, who when they did abandon them were called the Caspians. But they border each other now, and I bet that must be awkward. We see the Purple Nation is going to start to expand upwards, and a big push is going to be made for northern colonization, with a lot of countries looking like spaghetti. This Peach Pink country is going to expand up north, making their way to kind of becoming a Mongolia. So they look like this. And these guys, they know that they've been expansionist, and they are going to prove that even further with them claiming a massive amount of land. And if you're wondering how this is possible, this is because that these guys have existed for a considerably long amount of time. And if you didn't know, time equals money, literally in the sense of the Central Asian nations. But Sakhalin's economy is one of the best in the entire world. Of course, if you're excluding like the top 10 strongest countries, like China's economy is stronger than you, India's economy is stronger than you. But relatively, based on their location, Sakhalin has a really good economy. So they're going to establish a treaty with Hokkaido. Hokkaido is going to get all the territories east of this line, and Sakhalin can do whatever they want beyond that line, in which they will do this. So, yep, looks like that now. Now, Hokkaido is insanely strong, and they're finally going to project their strength. And they're going to project their strength with one final gauntlet, of which they will be able to prove themselves. And that is the invasion of South Japan. Now, it's kind of anticlimactic because Hokkaido is just so much stronger. But yep, just absolutely demolish them. Alright, encircle their capital. No, we're just going to take the capital. And yep, so goodbye Japan. Yeah, Hokkaido was easily able to topple over them and annex all their territory. So now when you look at this map and you see their colony, then you understand it a lot better that they are this strong. But now we're going to go back over here to this area, and it is pissing me off. It's just the white. I don't like it. I don't like how it looks like a donut. So, countries, expansion. Also, these guys, I think they have too dark of a color, so they're going to go to this. Primarily, they're going to expand eastward before the gray country and Kazakhstan can even do so. So they take this. Actually, I don't like that. You know what? No, I lied. This territory is going to go to the gray team. The Persians are going to push themselves all the way out here, so they're going to look like this. The purple team, why are they taking land? By the way, all of the countries that border the unclaimed territory are meeting in the capital of the gray team. And for some reason, the Persians are here, so they're going to take as much land as they can. The beef between them and India has definitely settled down, but they're going to be taking this. Oh, and red India, they're actually not going to take as much as you think they would. But they are the largest ones to border this area, so they are going to have a reasonable justification to take a lot of this. And at the end of it, they push themselves to look like this. And god damn, they're thick. The gray team is going to push themselves eastward in the south, and they're going to go ahead and take over these southern territories. Oh, and what do we do here? Actually, you know what? Sorry, a little border revision. The purple team is a lot stronger, so they're actually going to evidently end up taking this territory. And, yep, that's a bad storytelling on my part because these guys are definitely not strong enough to do colonization, even around their own borders. But the orange Bangladeshi country is going to take a huge amount of territory, taking this. The lime team will go ahead and they're going to expand north to look like this. South China is going to make a massive push out as they're going to expand their borders beyond what people thought was comprehensible for them. So in the end of it, they look like this. And the Chinese, they're going to expand a lot. Oh, and I'm starting their line over here. Oh, dear God. So, yep, they're going to push all the way out here. And now they're the big China. Yep. And what do we do with this territory? Well, we see a General Assembly form with all of the countries that now border this because obviously the purple country and the yellow Afghanistan country is not going to be important for this. So a general Commonwealth of Nations is going to decide what happens over here. Now, there are a lot of solutions brought to the table, and they do kind of correspond with their own ideology. For example, Red India and China being really strong, they're going to want to divide up the territory. But countries up here, like the previous Mongolian states, are going to be in support of creating a new country, because of course that would, limit the territory gained by the red team and all the big powers. So eventually we're going to see a middle ground being reached. The red team is going to take their claims along with China, and China took a surprisingly small amount of territory because they are about to implode, but we do see the red team and the Chinese take this. And yeah, now we get a new nation. Boop. And yep, so capital right there. And oh my god, we have reached it. These guys, they're now, it's all filled in. I had a nightmare about this, and I think I'm going to shift a couple of colors because they're just horrendous over here. So maybe that. Okay, I kind of like that actually. And, I think that's good for now. But we are going to see one final event occurring in this video, and it's actually going to have to do with the trade routes because these are extremely outdated. So I am going to bring them up to date because at this point, trade routes are probably still used. So the trade route in Northern Africa is going to continue to do so. Eventually, a separate trade route made by the brown team is going to be brought up into Ukraine. And actually, you know what? This is kind of a lame final event for episode 15. And I feel like 15 is a pretty monumentous number. It's like half of 30, and that's a third of like 100, basically. So I think we're going to do something with military alliances. And that is going to be two things. One is going to be the expansion of the Diamond Alliance, who is going to expand here to Ukraine. And Russia is going to make a military alliance. It is going to be between them, the Romanians, and evidently Egypt. Now you might be wondering, what is Egypt doing in an alliance with Romania and Russia? Well, I'll tell you one thing, it's definitely because they are threatened by Anatolia. And yeah, that's basically the entire reason. Since Anatolia is the leader of the Diamond Alliance, and the Diamond Alliance has grown quite strong, it makes sense for the Egyptians to seek a little bit the safety. So first, I want to cover up a little bit of a plot point. If you see here, there is a major military alliance, and that is between the countries of Croatia, Greece, Catalonia, and Carthage. And as Carthage was falling over to the Moroccan and Numidian rebels, Rome and Catalonia both took territory from them. This is one because they were suspended since they were in active rebellion, and it could have also maybe been a ploy by the Catalonians so they could gain some territory. So it's some very shady stuff going on with the Circle team, but yeah, just covering up my bad storytelling, my bad. And next, we're going to be visiting over here to the Middle East. There was an alliance to oppose the Diamond Alliance, and if you don't know what the Diamond Alliance is, it is basically an anti-Russian alliance, or countries that just have sort of negative views of the state of Russia. And in reaction to that, Russia created their own alliance. Egypt is in that alliance. And speaking of Egypt, technically they're the second strongest country in the world. But there's a little bit of a situation that is going to say otherwise. They're being invaded by the Lebanese country. Now, this is mostly made up of guerrilla warfighters, and Egypt just kind of like passes it off. They don't think it's too important that they lost a major settlement or that Lebanon is successfully going down the coast of Canaan. But now more divisions are being sent to the countryside, and the government is now starting to panic because they are legitimately setting military assets to try and defend against this, and they are doing minimal damage against the front line. And now the international community is going to fix a mistake. They are going to reallocate the second place to a different country. But of course, Egypt is now going to need a new place, and they are now number 5. But wait a minute. Anatolia's number 5. Oh, wait, they're not number 5. They are number 2. Anatolia is now the second strongest country in the world officially. And with the current placement of Egypt's military now being evident, the Lebanese are going to force the Egyptians to concede against their treaties. And now we can take a look at a peace treaty. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. Lebanon is going to gain these territories and nationally embarrass Egypt. And Egypt is embarrassed. Losers. Next, we're going to be going over here to the Nordic countries. Norway is going to colonize these northern islands and both discover and conquer Iceland. Now, this is a pretty major development for them because in their history, they have relatively been under the control of some powers, but now they're starting to take the role of the person that would be, I guess, kind of occupying the people that would develop into the situation that they have. I guess in regular English and not Agista language, that just means they're getting stronger. And they're going to push that ideal onto their neighbors. They need to fix this. And they're going to do that with the invasion of Sweden. But now this looks like some weird disease, so they're going to go ahead and invade the enclaves. And Norway is just going to go ahead and take these territories. They don't even sit down with any Swedish or South Swedish officials. They're just getting really ballsy. And this is going to prove even more evident as now they're going to land over here in the eastern areas of Greenland and establish a very small settlement. But moving not so far away, we're going to be seeing a brand new country landing over here in the Americas, and that is going to be Denmark. Their ships are going to land over here in the Labrador Isle, and they're going to discover the entire thing, as well as establish their knowing of the coastline of Quebec. And they're actually going to go ahead and just take the whole island and the eastern coastline of Quebec. Now, that tyrannical king of Denmark, he's dead. Instead, his son came into power, and his son is probably worse than his father, actually. He's very bad. And he is going to have even more colonial remarks than his dad ever made. He's going to expand the influence and interest of Denmark to Greenland. This is not Sweden. And they're going to set up an expansionist ploy, now getting a whole bunch of people to move over here to Quebec. But moving away from all of that, we are now going to go to Somaliland. If you remember not too far back, these guys were trying to get every single country in northern Africa to try and push into Africa and get more territory to, I guess, kind of conquer. But they never told the people the purpose was conquering. They said it was for the general excitement of exploring and for the people to get a taste of the unknown. And they're still continuing to ensue that policy without all of the international support. But there's a group of explorers down here that are going to get a little bit suspicious. They go up here to the capital in Djibouti, and they find some documents stored away in the capital. They find that the entire North African campaign is going to be a ploy for the entire country to expand. Now, this wouldn't be too bad in the sense of national modern politics. All countries want to expand their territory and influence. But something just doesn't settle right with these guys. So they're going to head back to this point from the capital, and they are just going to keep going without any orders being given by Somalia. They keep going down the coast of Mozambique, and once they get to this little gulf, they are going to set up their little area here. They're going to establish their own nation, and they are pretty spiteful against the Somalians. But remember, this is a group of explorers. So this is going to allow them to make incredible gains in explored territory over here in South Africa, exploring around Lake Malawi and getting to the central south areas. But their country is not very good at expanding, as they are only going to take the coastal areas, and that's a pretty good strategy, speaking of, just economics in general. They're also going to go ahead and expand down south. And these guys are not going to have a capital, and this is going to resemble their, I guess, kind of moving around explorer values. There are now multiple settlements down here that belong to the Pink Country, but they're not going to name any of them as their official jurisdictional capital, and that is to kind of abandon the ideology that Somalia was proving to be evident. Somalia was just showing that when power is centralized around a group of people, then they can do some questionable things, so they're going to try and avoid that the best they can. But yeah, now we have South Africa being explored, so that's pretty cool. But now going over here to Northern Australia, I feel like we forgot about these guys for a couple episodes, But yeah, now they're going to be going further and further into Australia. Now, let me talk about something. Ada's Pro's map looked a lot different in episode 16 than it does compared to mine, and that is comparative to the placement of the beginning of our WICSOs. Of course, if mine started over here in India, then it's going to take a couple more episodes to reach the Americas, since Ada's Pro's over here started in the Middle East, and this is a further away area than the Middle East, so mine started a little bit further away. So his was able to kind of sprawl out a lot more evenly because the Middle East is generally a very outward section. It's good for Africa, Asia, and Europe, but mine took a little bit to get over here to Europe. But I think that's actually pretty interesting to see like the pacing and all of that stuff, how it articulates between series. And yeah, just nerd talk over. We're going to see the Northern Red Australians start to expand more on the coast of Australia. These guys also had explorational value since they were that of the Blue Team, but they're not as extreme, say, as the South African country. But they're definitely still pretty good at colonizing. They're going to colonize the areas all the way to Bali and make a landing here on eastern Java. This is when they're now met by Blue Team colonizing forces, and the Blue Team is now going to continue to colonize Borneo. Primarily, the western coast is of much interest, as that is going to drive up their economy, and yeah, they're just going to expand in Indonesia. Also, I mentioned in episode 14 that northern Philippines was discovered, and I feel like that was kind of brushed over by me, so that's my bad. So the entirety of the Philippines is now going to be discovered. This is most definitely a collaborative effort between the South Chinese states, Vietnam, and the Blue Team. The Blue Team is going to set up a very small colony over here in this island, but they remark that they have no plans to go further into the Philippines, but they definitely have more plans to go into Borneo. But we see China is going to do something a bit interesting. They're going to land over here and colonize the northern areas of the Philippines. This is because China is cooking something up. They're beginning to articulate a plan that is going to blow our socks off. And I'm not going to reveal exactly what it is, but I am going to say that it does have something to do with a certain continent. But there are some things that need to happen first so that they can prove themselves worthy of this sort of ploy. So they're just going to go ahead and invade this dark red country. This is the first fighting we've seen in a while over here in Eastern Asia. Of course, we did see the conquering of South Japan, but that was more Japanese than mainland Asian. And just the Chinese specifically, they haven't gone to war in a while, so they are going to capture the capital, and the rest of this area is pretty barren. We're also going to see the Chinese just go ahead and take Taiwan. There's not really a war declared, and South China was about to lose it to rebels anyway, so China's just going to go ahead and mediate it, and along that process, they're going to take it. And Chinese forces are going to continue to move around the dark red country, and eventually they're going to begin to make a peace treaty. And yeah, the red team is willing to accept a peace treaty for, their existence. So now we can see what that'll look like. And actually, that's not that bad. China is going to go ahead and take this territory. The capital areas are remained exposed, but they at least, still belong to the red team. And China is beginning to expand their horizons, maybe even beyond Eastern Asia. But now we're going to go over here to Russia, and we're going to see something that happens to a lot of countries, and that is just going to be a rebellion that breaks around here in the Caspian Sea. But these guys have some very interesting ideals. They claim to be Russia. Now that's a little weird because we already have Russia. But these guys are like, okay, hear us out. The old capital over here, our rebels are now popping up here, and we are the true Russians. Now, they're not Russians because these guys are Russians, but we are the original Caspians, so to say. And they're kind of monetizing their own country in a very specific way. So I guess instead of monetization, I can just say propaganda or propagandicize. They're going to propagandize their country as the origins of Russia, trying to break free from the clutches that the elitist powers have instated in the state of Russia. And these guys are going to gain a lot of support, specifically from the Diamond Alliance, who is openly supporting this rebellion. But this rebellion is now getting out of hand, as now more of the population areas are going to break away and try and join this rebellion, which goes successfully. And a massive encirclement leads to a big concession of troops looking like this. And now Russia is going to be forced to give these guys their independence. And oh boy, they had something to say. Now you see, this does extend beyond the rebel-controlled territory, and that is for good reason. This is primarily because a lot of the little districts down here that didn't really resonate with the Russian government eventually forced the hand of the leader of Russia to kind of just let them join. And their capital is of course going to be in the old capital of Russia, and this shouldn't be much of a surprise as they're going to join the Diamond Alliance. And yeah, Russia is kind of getting toppled a little bit. But with this development over here in Russia, it is going to add a lot of spice over here to the Caspian areas and maybe set the scene for a big war. I'm not allowed to say anything else. But now we're going to go over here to the Americas, where everything is nice and dainty. The French country is going to expand down over here into the Carolinas, now pushing further out. And now they're going to go over here to the areas of like New York and Ithaca. And they're going to reach over here to Michigan. Subsequently, Michigan will become explored. And a lot of North America is being pushed for exploration. The Great Lakes are now known about, and the Hudson Bay as well. The Portuguese country is going to expand their claim down here in the southern areas to look like this. And the French are going to expand theirs out here to cut off Michigan from the Portuguese. I don't really think the Portuguese ever had ambitions for Michigan, but there you go, France now has this. And Quebec is fully discovered. A good chunk is taken out of it by the Benelux country. But Denmark will not be expanding, and that is just because a lot of their country is now being focused on developing Scotland. And that's because Scotland is feeling a little bit oppressed. And for good reason. Your country is being undermined by Denmark. I mean, come on. And they realize how pathetic that is, so they're actually just going to go ahead and break away. And we see our second ever independent nation over here in the British Isles. Their capital shall be right on over here. But Scottish independence is definitely going to rattle the influence over here in Europe. This is because the colonial possessions are now very hard to get to. Because it's kind of annoying. You gotta go like, yeah, and you gotta go like in between Norway. And you probably have to stop like in here in Iceland and then Greenland and then Canada. It's very sad for the Danish king. But once again, he is in the possession of a very rich, growing empire. So I wouldn't be too sad for him. Also, sorry if my like head leans off to the left of the camera. I'm really trying to find like a good camera position. Because I'm always looking this way. Because that's the way my OBS is. And this is like the good monitor. My camera's here, and, you know, you might see the shifting around of my camera positions over the next couple episodes, and that is probably just me being a little bit indecisive. But now, going down here to South America, we're going to see a lot of expansion take place, primarily by Catalonia, and that is the only country that can expand this area, because they are primarily the only colonizers here. They're going to expand down the coast of Brazil and Guyana, getting over to the little like island archipelago areas, but they're going to need to stop because they are freaking massive. But I was teasing it earlier, we're seeing a new country land in the Americas. First they land in Hawaii, then they land over here in the LA areas. Now, take a wild guess, yeah, it's China. China! They are going to land over here in California. Now China, this has been in the works for a very long time, and China has now just began to recently articulate it and expose their plan to the world with their landing in California. Their exploration forces are going to go outwards, and they are actually going to be very prosperous in California. Getting here to the Gulf of California is like Baja California. I don't know what this Gulf is called. I should probably get better at geography. It's something on my bucket list. But they're going to expand their colony, and the people over here in the east are shocked. And I know the theory in real life that China discovered California in like the something BCE, and it's really debated and it's kind of controversial, so I just made it real. Also, we see a country landing in Alaska, and surprise surprise, it is Hokkaido. Hokkaido has also been very dead set on colonization over the past couple episodes, whether it be around their own borders or in outside territory. They're definitely the fit country to explore and colonize Alaska. They're going to send out their colonization forces further down the coast, and they're going to get to this peninsula where they stop, and that is because there is a lot of data to be brought back from Alaska. So yeah, more American exploration. Next, going over here to Russia, they are going to be expanding further out into the Siberian areas. And these guys breaking away actually may have accentuated this process. Russia was pretty pent up with they have to control this area, and then you kind of have to pause between assimilation and then expansion. So expansion was the main route that Russia is now taking. And yeah, all of this area is going to be divided up. This is going to be held as a meeting in the capital of the Dark Purple country. The first country to speak is Kazakhstan, as they are probably the ones getting the least amount of territory. They're going to be getting that. And actually, I'm not going to fill it in quite yet, so we can just kind of see the division. The Russians are going to make one of the biggest claims over here, so they're going to take a lot of these areas in Siberia, and I'm just kind of yapping now, so they're going to have that. The Dark Purple team is going to expand their claims up north, and the Peach country is going to link up with the Arctic Sea. Next, we see these guys. They're going to expand also to the Arctic Sea. And then we see Sakhalin getting this. And if I can stall for long enough, hey, can you guys hear my mouse sounds? That's something I'm trying to fix. So, yeah, so now we got this. And Augusto editing, you did not have to edit that. And yeah, now we have the entirety of Asia being filled up, our second continent to be entirely filled up. And yeah, wow, there it is. But we're going to be seeing one final event occur over here in Asia, and that is going to be the unification between the Peach team and the Beige team. So that is going to go from this to this. and it kind of stands out a little bit. So I'm actually going to change their color very slightly. Maybe that? No, that's kind of weird. How about this? Okay, wait, I think I got it. Nope, do not got it. Alright, you know what? This will do for now. This capital will be erased and the now jurisdictional capital will be placed over here. And yeah, now we have a massive union occurring over here. And this was mainly for the purpose of economics that could be demonstrated and kind of partnered between both of the countries. And they were both worse off on their own, so together they are strong. So first off in our video, we are going to see a lot of expansion and exploration into northern Africa. A large division of explorers are going to be sent down the western coast of Africa, and of course this is being harbored by the Moroccan country, and they're gonna get all the way down here to Cote d'Ivoire, aka the Ivory Coast. We're also gonna see the Mozambique country. Remember, they are the exploring country, so they are going to branch out from their country and try to get to the western south coast of Africa. And along the way, they are expanding outwards into this brand new territory, which humanity has yet to touch. And like, humanity has been down here in Uganda. This is where they evolved. But in my series, they went all the way up here, and instead of settling in Mesopotamia, they settled in India. So humanity has been here, it's just they never chartered it. But now looking at the rivers, we see the Egyptian country is going to map out better the Nile River and the basin around it, and that's going to boost their economy a lot. At this point, Egypt probably has the second or first strongest economy. It might be a little bit of a tie with the Indian country, but I think it could also be a struggle including China. But in general, these areas in Ethiopia are going to become quite explored. And eventually they get to the north of Lake Victoria, and that's where humanity evolved, so that's pretty cool. But going over here to the Somalian country, they're going to have a little bit of turmoil inside of them. A lot of turmoil that's going to lead to disagreement, and if you didn't know, disagreements left unchecked can turn into civil war, and that's what's going to happen. A large group of provinces/districts that were set up by Somalia are going to break away here in the south, and they are going to be very swift in capturing the eastern areas of the country. At this point, the rebellion is gaining a lot of support and it is now encompassing over half of the entire country. And Western Arabia is going to start to invade into the Djibouti country. And yeah, there's not really much they can do about this, so the only thing they can do is succumb to it or sign a peace treaty, in which they are going to sign a peace treaty. And now we can take a look at what that peace treaty will look like. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. We see the Western Arabian country is going to get these territories, and they are going to expand a little bit more, expanding their African territory. But we also see Golden Ethiopia getting their independence. Now, this is not Golden Ethiopia from Ada's Pro's WICSO. But if we turn on the major cities, their capital is going to be right over here in the Horn of Africa. And yeah, now we have a brand new country over here on the front line of exploration, and they are going to fulfill that duty. They're going to go down the coast of Kenya, and eventually they're going to establish major settlements. One of those settlements are even going to turn into a major city, so we can add a brand new major city right here. And these guys are developing very quickly. But now going over here to the Balkans, we are going to see a bit of a coalition. Not a coalition against a massive threat, but Greece and the Montenegro country, they don't like Albania, so they're just going to team up and try and take out Albania. And yeah, they just get absolutely demolished. So Albania is now wiped off the map, but I am going to actually introduce their color to the Montenegro country. This still is the Montenegro country, I just like the flow of colors better. And Greece is going to get the southwestern areas, so they now look like this. So yeah, now we have a little bit of turmoil in the Balkans, probably from many to come. But now we're going to be going over here to the Americas. And something else I would like to mention is that I did create a religion map. So let me just kind of break it down so it makes a little bit more sense. Of course, we have the red Indian country's religion. This is basically the forefather of civilization. It's just the red team, the blue team, and a couple of the areas in Persia, so it looks like that. Going over here, they have a branch of their religion, which is the light red religion. Going down here, it's kind of like Western Arabia's religion. This is theirs. This is an offshoot of that religion, and it is over here in Northern Africa. The lime religion is just kind of like the Western European religion, and the seafoam green religion is a offshoot of that religion. The yellow religion are the Caspian beliefs, aka Russia, and this is an offshoot. There are a lot of offshoots. We have this random, it's like Central Asian religion thingy. It was empty space. It encompasses a lot of the weaker countries over here. We see Sakhalin's religion, China's religion, the Bengal religion, this new one that was started by Northern Australia, and Hokkaido has their own set of practices. And these are also being exempt over here. Not exempt, they are being introduced to the American continent. You can see the Western European powers have their religion here. And then you can see Hokkaido's religion and China's religion. So yeah, I just thought that was pretty cool. But like I was saying, we are going to go back to the Americas, where we are going to see some countries landing in more places, such as the Portuguese country is going to land in the Yucatan. They not only land, but they also make a colony over here in the northeastern part of the peninsula. Eventually, them and the Catalonian country, they are going to work together to try and discover the entirety of Central America. Of course, there is the Darien Gap, but we're just kind of, it doesn't matter. And now the entirety of Central America is explored. This, of course, is going to lead to both of the countries expanding, with the Catalonian country going over here to Panama. They colonize a good portion of it. And Portugal is going to establish their colony over here on this little bay area. So now we see colonization in Central America is thriving. But now we're going to see China sending out more explorers, and they are going to try and link up with Portugal and the Eastern North American colonization powers. They're going to shoot across the continent, and eventually Portugal as well is going to do this. They are unknowing of the Chinese presence, at least until they connect up, and when they connect up, they're like, oh, you're here, wow, that's cool. And this is going to give China a pretty good justification to expand their colony. So they're going to expanding it along the coast of California, and it is going to get down here to the Gulf of California. And eventually they have a pretty nicely sized colony. But, oh no. But Portugal as well is also going to establish their own claim in this area, and that will look like this. So in general, they're just trying to link up so more networks can be established between them and China. And France is also going to do a lot of colonization over here in America. They take the rest of Michigan as well as their peninsula and just kind of go around this lake. I should probably know the Great Lake names. But they're also going to establish their presence over here in southern Ontario, so that goes pretty well. And over here in Quebec, Denmark is finally stable enough to the point where they can expand their colony. Their colonization fund is not the highest, but when you have a tyrannical king, you can basically do whatever you want. But we're also going to have Catalonia going down the coast of South America. And they're going to establish another colony separate from this one, but their land masses technically could be combined. But this one in general is just going to be a little something like this. And yeah, the Americas are getting increasingly explored. Alright, and next we're going to be going over here to Northern Africa. We are going to see a war of common interest occur, and that is between Carthage and Numidia. Numidia is a country that broke away from Carthage, and now they are going to want greater sea access, so they are going to invade the western areas of Carthage. Eventually, they meet up with the border of Morocco with their ground invasion troops, and they are going to reach out to the Mediterranean Sea, and they are going to just really like it. Of course, this is because they are aligned with Catalonia, since Catalonia doesn't really like Carthage, and, Numidia doesn't like Carthage. Therefore, they can enjoy very nice relations. But once Carthage is basically reduced to nothing, they are going to go ahead, and they are going to force Carthage... Sorry, I can't talk correctly. They're going to force Carthage to surrender. And in this peace treaty, I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and do it while I talk. Not like that. So we just see one very long line being made here, but that is going to be very detrimental to Carthage because they have all of that taken away. And this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. The Numidian country is able to expand their coastline tenfold, getting it all the way over here in the Mediterranean. And yeah, Numidia's economy is now thriving, and this does encourage them to move their capital from here all the way here to the northern Mediterranean, so right there, that works. And yeah, big Numidia. But next, we're not going to stray too far away from those areas, because now we're just going to go over here to the Caspian and Black Sea areas. If you look at the military alliances, this place is packed with them. You have the Square Team, and then you also have the Diamond Alliance. And the Square Team is going to be getting a brand new member. And that is going to be over here in light yellow Persia. They are joining because they feel like the Diamond Alliance is way too expansionist and they might expand into them, whether that be overthrowing their government or possibly, just invading them completely. So now we see the Persian country is going to find refuge with the Square Alliance. And yeah, now we see tensions are at an all-time high. Next, we're going to be going down here to Arabia, and they are just going to be expanding outwards into Africa, just to kind of increase their territory, and more territory in their case just means more money. So yeah, it is of their primary interest to establish this area and get a lot more people out there, and it is working a lot. Next, we are going to be going over here to Indonesia. This is going to be the point where the blue team is going to discover the entirety of Borneo, and eventually after they discover the entire thing, they are going to go ahead and colonize the coastline of it, so they're going to actually take a majority of it. So this is just going to kind of harbor their future explorational plans. And at this point, they're now going to start island hopping, similar to what they did over here south. And yeah, Red Australia is not going to like that. At one point, the blue team is just going to colonize the entirety of Borneo and establish another colony here in the top of this island. but now they're getting pretty big and quite extensive, so they're just going to keep to discovery for now. The final area of expansion for them is going to be over here in the southwest of this, or the northwest of this island, and these ones in the center. So yeah, now we have the blue team establishing a lot of their dominance over here in the Indonesian and Filipino islands. But now we're going to be going over here to the red team, because there is something I do want to explain. The red team over the past 10 episodes has been very expansionist, and that is just because of their nature. It's kind of like their ego, if you say. This is because they are the first nation, and this is widespread that everybody agrees on this. And that kind of gives them a little bit of an ego boost, like we're the country, so that means we can undermine your country, and maybe even your country or your country or your country. You better look out for the red team. But this is their nature. This is with a semi-democratic leader. Now, democracy obviously hasn't been a thing yet, but this is just the 7 oligarchs. There is no king overlooking those oligarchs. But there has been a little bit of a government shift. A coup is going to happen inside of the red team. This reestablishes the purpose of the country, and then they are going to change how the leadership works. Instead of 7 oligarchs, it is now going to be downgraded to just 5. Of course, keeping it an odd number so it can't be 50-50. But overlooking those 5 oligarchs is now going to be a king, and he holds a majority of the power. So the red team, per se, is a monarchical oligarchy. Kind of. I'm not really sure if that's a thing that's been, tried and tested through history. But it is sort of a new ideology in the scope of WICSO. So who knows, maybe the red team could have a little bit of a crash out one way or another. But next, not going too far away from India, we are going to see the Koreans and the Chinese. They are going to make a little bit of a treaty. China is going to start their invasion over here in the light blue team, attempting to try and capture their capital and any major population pockets. But as soon as China starts to move in, we see Korea moving in as well. And they were forming a defensive pact so that their armies wouldn't collide, and if they did, then they would talk it out instead of fight. Because if you do see, they are both top 10 powers, being 3 and 7, and that would devastate a lot of their population and tank their economies. So it's just kind of a precautionary act that they just signed that treaty. And these light blue guys kind of piss me off. They're like really long. I don't like how long they are. We see Sakhalin's going to get involved, and they're just going to want to get the northern areas. It's understandable because they're kind of like poking into their country. I wouldn't really like it if a country poked into me and I was a country, so we're just going to go ahead and they're going to take the northern areas. But not you, dark red team. Your economy is about to collapse. China is going to move increasingly into the light blue team's territory. And eventually they're going to meet up with Korean armies, and they are going to march south together because they are the bestest of friends. Eventually they get to this area, and since there's no dispute, they are going to split the capital region down the middle. And at this point, the rest of it is going to be partitioned between the invading powers, looking like this. And now we can take a look at this peace treaty between Sakhalin, China, and Korea. Alright, and then this peace treaty, we see the dividing powers dividing up their country entirely. China gets the southwestern segments, actually giving the capital over to Korea, but of course, the capital is going to be demolished and downgraded into a major city. And Sakhalin is going to take these northern areas, and now the borders of Eastern Asia will look like this. But next, we are going to go very close to this area. It's just going to be these 3 countries, and they are going to unite into a union. This union is going to be between the purple team, the light kind of lime team, and the dark, like grayish green team. These guys are all going to unite into a new nation. And this country is going to want their capital along the trade route, so they are going to pick this one over here. So it is kind of closer to the economic prosperity of China, so that could be pretty good for them. And yeah, Asia is getting more unified, some in bloody ways and some in peaceful ways. But next, we are going to be going down here to the purple team. The purple team has been quite dormant for a while, but they are going to be going on the attack for the first time in a while. They are going to be attacking this lime green team. Now, this Persian country is not very strong and nor very economically, prosperous, so the purple team, who is economically prosperous and strong, is going to be able to take 2 major cities in the first couple of months of this war. And yeah, it's not really fair for these guys. A division is just going to go ahead and capture the capital without much resistance because these guys never really had an army. And yeah, Purple Persia is just going to take the entire thing. And I do not need to do the little cutty thing that I usually do because this was a really easy peace treaty. And now the purple team has expanded to the dismay of India because remember, these 2 are still like pretty bad allies. Bad allies in the sense of, their enemies. But yeah, we're just going to have to see how the purple team's expansion is going to coincide with the new red team king in the future. Next, going back over here to Eastern Asia, we are going to see a mutual defense treaty being signed between Korea, China, and the Sakhalin country, that will look like this. And of course, this is something I can turn on and off, so it's not like it's going to be there forever. But now China can't attack Korea, and the Sakhalin country can't attack Korea or China, and these guys can't attack each other, but this is going to allow them to hold better international relations. Next, we're going to be going over here to Alaska, where Hokkaido is going to be expanding a colony along the coast of Alaska. This is because a lot of natural animals here, there can be like leather and a whole bunch of stuff like that from beavers. So yeah, Alaska is going to be increasingly colonized and explored by Hokkaido, and China is going to make an attempt to try and link up with Hokkaido. They get over to the Seattle / like Washington areas, and eventually they get to British Columbia, where they're going to stop because it's really cold. Next, we're going to be going over here to Tanzania, and in the last episode, when these guys came down here, there was a separate group that just kind of settled here and never really left, and they're finally going to declare themselves a nation. These guys, like these guys, are not going to be powerful enough to have a capital. These guys don't have capitals for more symbolic reasons, but these guys literally are not strong enough nor centralized enough to have a capital. So these guys are going to have to rely on their own devices until they can set up a proper government and jurisdiction. But for the final event in our video, we're going to see another exploration group. They yada yada, they're going to get lost, and they're going to get over here. But, they may have not actually gotten lost. They could have just, not wanted to be a part of Morocco. And eventually they find a massive river network stationed here in Western Africa, so they're going to just kind of settle on it. And one thing leads to another. We are going to have a brand new nation. Look at that. Now, of course, it's like the same thing I've been spewing for a while. These guys are not developed enough to have a capital, so they're going to have to stay capitalist. Now, one thing that I'm noticing about this map is that the Americas being this colonized looks a little bit underdeveloped, and that is mainly because Africa is not very developed. So let's change that, shall we? A massive campaign not led by the Somalians, but now led by the Egyptians and the Moroccans. They are going to push for a new kind of colonization campaign over here in Northern Africa, and that is going to work very well as they have achieved a new kind of technology, being camels, and basically the entirety of Northern Africa is able to have networks inside of them. So now Northern Africa has been fully discovered and has networks inside of it, but it's Southwestern Africa, screw it. They're all going to be discovered, so now the entirety of Africa is known about. This, of course, is going to prompt a couple of countries to go ahead and expand. Now, granted, these guys are not very strong. They just appeared in the last episode, but they are going to be a key factor for being a catalyst of exploration over here in Western Africa. But now African exploration catalysts are not really needed because the entirety of Africa is known about. This seafoam green country, they are going to pride themselves in being the birthplace of civilization, even though the birthplace of civilization was here, but they are now encompassing the birthplace of humanity. Now, I'm sure the seafoam green country and the red country, if they were the same power, then they would probably have a good time talking about this. But of course, the red team is miles ahead stronger than the seafoam green country, so they have a bit to go until they can officially talk things out. But that is not their primary interest, as they are going to be expanding very quickly, meeting up with the Somalians. And we also see these guys, there's going to be a group inside of them, ironically enough, that wants to break away, and they are going to achieve that. So we are going to be having a brand new country break away from the Mozambique country. Now, these guys aren't going to be breaking away in the sense of civil war, but they are going to be a large migration group that is going to settle down here in the southwestern areas of Africa. And these guys are the same colors as the Ethiopians, so I'm going to change their color, and I think that's pretty good. I'm very creative with this coloring, don't worry about it. But yeah, Africa is being developed very quickly, but now we're going to go to a very old section of the world, and that is the red team. Because the red team is going to do something that they have never done, and that is going to be military cooperation between them and other nations. They're going to form an alliance, being the Trapezoid Alliance, and they're going to force the hands of a couple of countries to join. That, of course, being Orange Bangladesh, the Orange Team, and finally, the Lime Team. Now, this alliance, of course, includes the top strongest country, of course, being the Red Team, but it also includes the number 6 strongest country, being Burma. But actually, staying on the military alliances layer, we're going to see a new country joining Russia's alliance, and that is going to be Prussia. Now, it might seem a little bit random because it's just random European nation is joining up against the Diamond Alliance, but they are not joining for those intents, because Prussia is joining for their safety. Of course, Russia is the leader of the Square Alliance, and Russia is big and very powerful. Prussia is very small and weak, and they come from a nation that is very old and wants to expand. Of course, they're also surrounded by Denmark and to an extent Norway, of which both are expansionist powers. So, they just want a little bit of, like security. But of course, now the Diamond Alliance is going to have to one-up the Square team, and this has been a long time coming, but it is now going to be the Teal Caspian country joining in on the Diamond Alliance. That's not that much of a game changer, but it is including the kind of solidarity of the Diamond Alliance. But something's going to happen that's going to increase tensions by tenfold. A military incident is going to occur over here in Ukraine. If you look at the trade routes, there is a trade route that is right here, and the point where all three of these trade routes meet is in debated territory. Basically, if you look at this point, it's kind of hard to tell whether it's inside of the Russian country or the Ukrainian country. And the Russian country is the forefather of the Square Alliance, and the Ukrainian country, and Ukraine being a member of the Diamond Alliance. And Russia is going to see Ukraine, and they are going to have their troops inside of Russian territory. So that could look a little something like this. And technically, that is a violation of the attack one, attack all, I guess kind of Article 5, if you're kind of comparing it to NATO in real life. And these troops not only are going to be stationed in the areas where the trade route meets, of course Russian soldiers are going to fire back, and it looks like a worldwide war is on the horizon. But one country who is on neutral grounds is going to come in and save the day, and that is going to be Purple Persia. What the hell was that? Anyways, going away from that occurrence, we are going to see the leader of Russia and the leader of Ukraine and the leader of the brown team. They're all going to meet inside of Purple Persia. And Purple Persia, they have experienced with some military threats in the past, of course being the red team, and they're trying to prevent a worldwide war on their exact border. A war that they would probably get dragged into. So the nations are going to meet and they're going to talk some stuff out, and they're going to realize that they should not do any war because war bad, and no war equals happy world. So a crisis is averted, and eventually Ukraine and Russia, there's no land exchangement. They are just going to be keeping the border, but the border is going to be internationally recognized by the alliance and a good percentage of the world. But now, not going too far away, we are going to see the Western Arabian country go on a bit of a conquest. They're going to be invading here into Qatar. Now, Qatar is a very new country, and of course, the orange team can't invade them because they do have a peace treaty. So the Western Arabians are kind of just solidarizing their presence over here in Arabia. And that goes very well, as they are surprisingly able to trample over a very weak nation. A weak nation that no longer exists. So yeah, Western Arabia is starting to make itself an imminent threat for multiple Gulf states and the South Arabian Peninsula. And a pair of countries is going to unite. And that is going to be the South Oman country and the Yemeni country. They unite, keeping the color of South Oman. This union is going to be aimed at deterring the expansionist views of the Western Arabians, and the Western Arabians can't really go anywhere else. Of course, Western Arabia could go over here to Mesopotamia and try to conquer them, but of course that would kind of undermine the entire policy that the purple team is trying to ensue. So they're kind of limited unless they can go west. Of course their name is Western Arabia, so why didn't they think of that sooner? They're going to expand their colony, going now over here into the areas of Sudan and getting over here to South Sudan. Eventually Somalia, or I guess Djibouti, is going to get back into the colonization game, and they're going to establish a new set of borders, also reworking their terrible border with the Western Arabians. So now they're going to claim these territories, and the Western Arabians are just going to basically meet up with that border. And now rivers aren't as major of a kind of home basis for countries that strictly have to follow them. Of course, Egypt, over here, the desert is barren and the river's good, so you're kind of incentivized to follow along the river. So they're going to do that, but I'm saying that it is not becoming as much of a requirement. Now we're going to be going over here to the British Isles, and something very dire is going to occur. The British Isles are going to push for independence. Two separate independence movements are going to spark inside the Benelux British claim and the French British claim, and both are going to take the respective colonies of their forefathers. And now we have two new countries here in the British Isles. It's not going to cause a British havoc like it did in Ada's Pro series, but it is going to create two new nations inside of the British Isles, and that is evidently going to look like this. Now I might swap these guys' color a little bit because it is a little bit counterintuitive with the Scottish. I think orange does it well. But now we're going to be going over here to the Eastern European areas. We're going to see a massive union occurring, and that is going to be between the Romanians, the the Macedonians, the Danube country, Hungary, and that's it. So these guys are all going to unite under the banner of Romania, and they are going to be a massive country. Of course, they're going to keep their capital over here in the Romanian capital, But this is now a conglomeration of all of those Romanians, like, states. And I am going to shift the color a little bit to represent the change. So I think we can roll with this. And the brown team sort of had a premonition with this. Of course, the brown team can't exactly predict the future, but they did see there were a lot of weak states over here and a much stronger forefather that could habilitate their economic... Shut up. Anyways, the brown team did have some premonitions that this would happen. Of course, not being able to exactly predict the future, but they are able to, I guess, like, of course, everyone knows that this union happened, but the brown team saw it a little bit as it was coming. And the meeting of the Alliance forefathers inside of Purple Persia is sort of starting to be disregarded in the sense that this is happening, and of course, if this is happening, that is heightening tensions between the Square and the Diamond Alliance, and that is very bad. But now we're going to be going over here to Eastern Asia. And we are going to be going down here actually a little bit south, not exactly in Eastern Asia, but we are going to see Malaysia letting go of their Sumatran claim, officially giving it all over to the blue team. But now we're going to head on right over here to the Quebec areas, and this is where the Benelux country and the Danish country, they're going to work out a treaty to split up this piece of land. And that is going to look like this, with the Danish country getting a lot of land. But now the Danish are going to partner together with the Norwegians, and they're going to discover a lot of the south of Denmark. I was about to say Sweden. Well, I got both of them wrong. It's Greenland. And both of them are going to take their respective interest and apply it over here in Greenland, with the Danish taking a lot, but the Norwegians not taking as much. Of course, Norway is now a big North Sea empire, and they are having to start to tone it down a little bit. But now we're going to be going over here to Central Asia, and this is a very, not important event, but these guys are going to be jumped. It's going to start with the purple team invading. Then we have the Northern Siberian Union. They are going to be invading from the northeast. And the final nail in the coffin is this new union over here. They are going to be expanding as well into here. And it's a little bit interesting, this sort of era inside of WICSO. You have a lot of unions occurring, like over here in Romania. There was this one in the last episode, and this one a couple episodes ago. But those unions have very expansionist policies, and that is most likely just the nature of my WICSO. But with this Siberian Union now taking the capital, it is going to fall to foreign forces. And we can now take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. And yeah, let's just unpack this a little bit. This dark purple team is going to be getting this. They invaded a lot of the broad areas, so therefore they're going to be getting a lot more. These guys invaded a very broad area as well, there being the south. And these guys get the capital, therefore they get a little amount of land, but a whole hell of a lot of population. And that is something that this union needs desperately. But now we're going to be going over here to Western Africa. Morocco is just going to continue to expand down, now getting over here to Senegal and Guinea. And these guys are becoming massive. But now we're going to see over here in the Circle Alliance, a massive achievement is going to be reached. 2 countries are going to join the Circle Alliance. Those 2 countries being Albania. Sorry, no, not Albania. This is the Montenegro country. And surprisingly enough, Rome. Now, Rome joining is obviously a surprise because this alliance was made to deter Rome, but Rome did have a bit of a government shift, of course being enacted by the Circle Alliance, so their jurisdiction that they wanted to apply to Rome has given them the eligibility to join the Circle Alliance. But now going over here to North America, we are going to see a joint effort by the Chinese and the Portuguese country. They are going to try to discover the rest of Mexico, and if I can click the right layer, they are going to go ahead and do just that. And now we are going to see something very sad. Of course it happened inside of modern history, but it's also going to happen here. A straight line is going to be made. This is going to be made along this... it's not a parallel. What's it called again? I don't know. But these guys, this is going to be the straight line, and China gets everything west of it, so they now look like this. And Portugal can take a lot of the eastern areas of this line, and they're going to take this. Now, not all the way down here. It's just going to look a little something like this. And of course, the line extends further up. It probably goes up like this. But these are just the areas where the population sort of just kind of benefits more. Therefore, the line is going to be used, and that is why it is represented inside of this border. But not straying too far, we're going to see the Portuguese and the Catalonians. They are going to divide up the rest of Central America, looking like this. Speaking of the Catalonians, they are going to expand their colony over here in South America, now linking up the western and the eastern segments. And they're going to go ahead and expand further down the coastline of Brazil. But now going over here to Oceania, this place does not get talked about enough, and I will try to include it more. But the blue team and the Northern Australians, surprisingly enough, are going to team up and they are going to aim at discovering the rest of Papua New Guinea, which goes successfully. But the Northern Australians are a little bit more fixated on the actual area where they are, and a lot of Northern Australia is going to become discovered. They create a very small settlement over here in the western areas of New Guinea and down here in the southwestern areas of New Guinea. They also establish one here in the northeastern areas of Australia, and the blue team is going to go ahead and take the rest of the Indonesian archipelago, also taking some of the southern islands of the Philippines, so now their colony is looking very massive. And of course, this would make the blue team have a very strong and stable economy. Of course, if you're the red team, then your economy is going to be great, but the blue team's economy is probably a little bit better than yours. And that is for two reasons. One, the blue team has a lot better and stable source of income being here in Indonesia, but also reason number two, they are a lot more isolated and secluded. Of course, the red team is going to have to deal with international politics, with them establishing the Trapezoid Alliance, but the blue team is just kind of left here down to the South Indian Peninsula, and they're able to just kind of chill and do their own thing, allowing their economy to go up a lot. But now going over here to Eastern Africa, we are just going to see these guys. They're going to divide up a lot of the eastern areas, like the Horn of Africa, and that will look like this. Of course, you can see that the gold team has been cut off by these guys, and I just realized these guys are very similar to these guys, so let me just change their color a bit, and if I can stall a little bit longer, then maybe, just maybe, these guys can have the correct color, and there we go, that does it well. But for the final event inside of our video, we're going to be going over here to Europe. And here is where we see a union taking place, but not in the way you'd think. A western portion of the purple team is going to break away, and you're like, Augusto, this is the opposite of unionization. This is civil war. And of course, it is. But then the Benelux country is just going to unite with the rebellion, and that is because a couple days prior, the German country, or the Bavarians, they're going to unite with the rest of the purple country, now forever eliminating their ugly borders. And now Europe looks a little bit less of its sins, and it is going to be cleared up. First, I'm going to be going down to this dark red country. Now, this country may not seem very important, and you'd be correct, it's not very important. It formed like 2 episodes ago, but it's doing surprisingly well as a civilization. It's one of the more successful ones, and that is mainly because of its location. You can see it's on this river network in the Niger areas, and that's why it is benefiting so much. And it's going to soon go across the Ivory Coast and start to colonize a lot of this rich ivory land. But eventually, boats are going to be seen over here in this little dip in the coast, and a country is going to make a landing. The people that live here have never really seen boats. The people here are a bit more primitive than the people that are up here in Europe. Of course, people up here in Europe are like sophisticated, while these guys down here live without nation and according to the Europeans are, quote, savages. So they make a landing, and you might recognize this color, but to the people that don't recognize this color, I'm going to specify it in a little bit. But they come to Central Africa bringing peace, or at least promising it, and they're going to bring a lot of money that comes along with that promise. And if you don't know already, this is the Catalonian country that has just landed in Africa. This is the first presence of an outside European power inside of the African continent, so it would be pretty interesting to see how it plays out. But we're going to see something else happening as well, and that is going to be the sophistication of the African nations. Specifically South Africa, Mozambique, Victoria, and the Niger country. The reason South Africa is gaining a capital is because it's all the way down here at the bottom, and if you didn't know, there is not a Suez Canal, so if you want to get from Iberia over here to India, then you have to go all the way down, like around Africa. But eventually they're going to go around and stop in southern Africa. And that's like the long bit of the journey. So this is where they're getting a lot of payout. So that's why they have sophisticated themselves into creating a jurisdictional capital. But next we're going to be going over here to the Mozambique country. And there's going to be right over here, if I can click the river layer, it's going to be right here. This is mainly because they were one of the first major African nations that were kind of just born purely African, so they have come a far way to develop. Victoria, there's not much to say. They were kind of a part of the same separatist movement as the Mozambique country, so they are going to see similar technological advances. And like I said earlier, the Niger country is very rich, so they are going to put their capital right where their wealth is coming from, here on the Niger River. And now we see these nations gaining their own respective capitals. But turning on the rivers, we are going to see that the Spanish Catalonians are going to incentivize their colonization over here in the river bay areas. And they're going to find a very complex network including of the Congo. And they're going to profit off this a lot. Eventually, this colony is going to become a massive payout, even bigger than the payout that Brazil sufficed them with. And Brazil is one of their oldest colonies, and the fact that this one is producing a lot more kind of shows the richness of this area and how maybe some countries can exploit it. But there aren't that many countries that are eligible for colonization, so how about we change that? A big war is going to occur over here in the British Isles. And this is going to be the purple team invading the orange team. Now, like I said in the last episode, the purple team is derived from the French government, and the orange team is a separatist movement derived from the Benelux country. But the orange team was a lot worse off. The Benelux did not treat this well, but this area is a lot better set up. So now the separatist movement is going to have separatist movements, and we're going to see one popping up over here, but we're also going to see one popping up here in the north, officially splitting the country in two. And the rest is taken by the purple team, kind of acting as a buffer state between the two radical societies. And now we can take a look at this peace treaty dividing up the orange team. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. We see the purple team gaining a lot of territory and two new states. Now, of course, this one up here was lime before, and now they have transformed into orange, and that is kind of just for the purpose of color continuity. But do keep in mind that the old orange team is dead, and this is not their, predecessor, but it is the same color, and that is just for continuity. But there's also this brand new golden state down here that was born from the south, and this was the Southern Rebellion. And now England is starting to gain a lot of power, and they are going to further demonstrate this in Ireland. The boats are going to pull up to the shores, and eventually they're going to be like, yo, we're invading you. And the Irish, who are brand new to the game, have only formed a couple episodes ago, are going to be absolutely demolished by the purple team's skill. It is just unmatched. The purple team has been involved in too many ranked matches, and they are too experienced, while the Irish have been in no ranked matches. Eventually, the Scottish, who are a little bit more powerful in ranking than the Irish, are going to land in their territory as well. Once again, like I said, the Irish have just not been playing the game for long enough. Eventually, their home base is going to be captured, and they're going to have to relocate their divisions, but the boys are starting to lose their morale. The Scottish move further in the north, and eventually their squad is forced to surrender over to the English, and their server is going to be taken down and replaced with the purple team server. And we can take a look at what that's going to look like. Alright, and in this ranked match ending, we see the Irish are fully eradicated, and they are replaced by the server of the purple team, and a little bit of the server went over to the Scottish, and I am never going to talk like that again. I am very sorry. But on a real note, we do see the purple team emerging as a very strong British Isles country. But now going over here to the Americas, the Chinese are going to do something that is going to basically just give them a godsend. Some explorers are going to explore this territory, trying to expand the frontier of North American exploration. And eventually, one of them is going to rush back to the administrative capital of the Chinese colony, and they're going to be like, yo, you got to set up a colony right there. Now, the Chinese, understandably, are confused, but they comply, and they're just going to trust this random guy. And eventually, the Chinese are going to establish some settlements up here. You know, they're going to move some people up here, and they're going to officially claim it for the Chinese. But eventually, the colonizers, led by the explorers and kind of being aimed in a direction, is going to expand the colony inwards, and eventually they're going to find copious amounts of gold. A lot of people inside of the administrative areas of the Chinese colony were like, yeah, these guys are crazy. Let's not say what they're going to do because just it's bad public image. But eventually, those administrative figures were left to put to the side, and now the Chinese colony is expanding a lot because of this gold rush. And of course, now a lot of other colonizers are going to be wary of this sort of thing, but some of them are going to be pushed to their limit, as now the American colony, administrated by the French, are going to be pushed out very far into Quebec. Now, like I said earlier, I said that they were going to be pushed to their limit, but the French don't really have a limit in this sense. Of course, with them being a colonizing power, they're going to explore a lot of the North American territory, which is going to lead to their justification of a potential gold rush, so they can colonize a lot of territory, and eventually they encompass the entirety of the Great Lakes, which is a very good economic output. Eventually, we're going to see Hokkaido is going to explore along the coast of Alaska, and they're going to find a lot of gold as well. If you didn't know, a lot of the gold is centralized over here, kind of, at least as far as I know. And the Hokkaido colony is going to be able to expand a lot, as this gold rush is their justification, and they're going to take a lot of territory around the natural minerals, which allows their colony to expand greatly. They explore all the way up here, which is the furthest north, I believe, that humanity has ever gone, and Alaska is fully discovered, and eventually they're going to move further out into Canada and the central areas of the United States. Now, of course, Canada and the United States being figurative, they do not exist in this world. At least they don't yet. But the Hokkaido Alaskan colony is going to expand and thrive, and it is going to encompass a lot of Alaska, surprisingly enough. And the Chinese are going to move inward as well, as they aim to encompass a lot of the western areas of North America, because who knows, maybe another one of these gold rushes could happen again. But not straying too far away, though, we are going to see the Danish. They are going to land over here in this island, which I'm not sure if it has any natural minerals or any reason to colonize, but it is a little bit of a docking port to get from Greenland to Quebec, and that would be very beneficial. Because right now, their boats have to go all the way here through the North Sea, which is very dangerous, and dock here in Greenland. And then they have to go all the way down here to Quebec. And those are two pretty long journeys, so maybe we could make one of them easier by just going like that and then that. So they're going to establish a series of tiny colonies that are going to allow for the trade between Greenland and Quebec to go up a lot, and it's going to become a lot cheaper and inexpensive. This causes the Danish economy to do a lot better, and you can kind of see why countries are incentivized to colonize. Eventually, these 3 islands over here are going to be discovered, and a landing is made on like the main areas of North America, not really being a separate island, but actually being the mainland of Canada. And of course, this is also a very good place to just kind of set up your colonial empire, because it's not really about what you're getting right now, it's more about the frontier of the area that you could get. So they're going to take these 3 islands and autonomously administrate this area, which they are going to do by having a very small section here. And basically, they're telling anybody that wants to colonize here, not that like anybody can, but they are telling them to just go and screw off. But I swear, this is the final event we're going to see in North America, but it's just going to be the French increasing their colonization here on the Hudson Bay. Now, let me just specify something. Let me just give you an example of what I'm about to say. This is the Portuguese colony, correct? They are over here in Iberia, but they have their administrative claims over here in the Americas. But this is not like their colony. This is the claimed territory they claim to have. Their actual colony probably looks a little something like this, with different segments being a lot more important than the others, and everything outside the red is more of an administrative thing. So this is most likely what it looks like. This is the same with the French. Most of their colony aspects are over here on the eastern coast, and maybe reach out here to like Michigan. But overall, a lot of these northern areas are not really consistent of the actual, French claimed areas. And the difference between claimed and a colony is that you have like assets out there. So like say if the Portuguese really just focused all of their colonization assets to move further out here, then that would be like considered their colony. This would be an area of the colony. But yep, sorry about the yap sesh, and we are now going to be going back over here to Africa, where we're going to see more countries start to fill in territory. The Mozambique and Victorian countries are starting to realize that the Europeans in Africa are going to be a very terrifying prospect, and that is just going to incentivize them to have the justification to take a lot of territory. So it's a little bit counterintuitive what they are doing, but according to them, it's doing well. Eventually, better established connections are going to be made between Mozambique and South Africa, and at this point, these are fully functioning societies. Ones that are a lot more advanced than the ones that were before colonization in real life. Of course, you had the Ghana Empire before the French and the English came here. Of course, that is real life, that is not WICSO. But we're going to see something a little bit more comparable, but something a little bit more unrealistic in the aspect that these areas are a lot more developed, but the Europeans are not going to stray from their forefathering activities. Colonization is going to thrive in Central Africa. And that is being demonstrated by the Catalonians, like I said, and they're going to establish a meeting in their capital. Basically, this meeting is going to consist of some very precarious and strong nations. The countries involved will be a circle. This is, of course, going to be Catalonia, Portugal, France, the Benelux, the Romans, and finally the English/Irish, but I'm just going to be referring to them as the English. All of these countries are going to come together and start to draw up claims dividing up this big, empty and totally uncolonized piece of land. Oh, also we see Denmark as well. Denmark is a little bit interesting because in this history, kind of uncomparable to the real life history, they were a big colonizing power in this history. Of course, in Addis Pro's series, Ireland was a big colonizing power, and he put aside a lot of realism for that, but we're just going to be seeing our situation being comparable, but just replacing Ireland with Denmark. And these guys are going to start to draw up claims for Africa. But of course, there are going to be some things that Rome is going to have to do so they can create themselves to be a little bit more solidaro. First of all, the Greeks are going to go into an economical crisis. Now, that's straying a little bit away from Italy, but all you need to know is that Greece needs some quick money, and they're going to achieve that by Rome being able to buy this area that they won in the coalition. So Rome is going to be able to purchase this strip of land. They're also going to be able to buy off the rest of Corsica from the Catalonians. This just helps to make their country be a lot more solidaro, and Rome is now a lot more evident of a power. Now, of course, there are countries that want to go and colonize but are not able to. The Norwegians are definitely secluded over here to the north. They're kind of just trapped over here because you have two very strong powers that are already incentivized to colonize, of which being the English and the Danish. So it's kind of blocking them off a little bit, and Norway is very sad. The Baltic country has declared that they want to colonize, but of course they're not able to do that. Russia as well. But this meeting is going to be known as the Conference of Barcelona, or the Barcelona Conference. This is going to be a conference, of course, led by the Catalonians, as they are the forefather perpetrator to this conference, of this conglomeration of nations, like I said at the beginning of the video. And yeah, that was just a little bit of like secrecy that's been traded around between, of course, all of these nations. Denmark as well, but they're a little bit less involved. And these countries are starting to industrialize themselves, making themselves a lot more fit for the position of colonizer. But now we're going to go over here to the trade route map. It has been a long time since we've updated this, but I think it needs one final update because trade routes are starting to go out of style. First of all, the trade route is going to expand down the coast of Arabia, going into the Orange Team. This is something that should have happened a while ago. But a track is going to split off and it's going to go to the South Arabian Union. One is going to go down the western coast of Arabia and reach the western Arabian capital. They're even able to make one across the Strait of Bosporus, which goes well and links up in the brown team capital. One is going to link up with the Russian capital over here in the pink team, and another one is going to be made through this union because they wanted their ally to be controlling instead of their enemy. And one transcontinental one is going to be made across Eastern Europe. That's all of the trade route stuff we see over here in the west, but what about in the east? Well, one is going to be made down the coast of Burma and it is going to link up over here in the capital of Malaysia. One is going to diverge over here in Afghanistan and it's going to go through the gray team, kind of making a pivotal turn. And it links up in the capital of the gray team and eventually with the Silk Road. And one is made to the south of the blue team, not really for any purpose of linking up with an administrative capital, but sort of just kind of like, economic prosperity, it's better. And we see another trade route being established for a quicker connection. If you don't really want to go south, you can just go straight across. And for the final trade route, we are going to see one going from Egypt to the colony of Western Arabia through Djibouti and ending up here over in Somalia. And these are the trade routes at their peak. They're not going to expand anymore because they have no reason to, and that is because more localized internal networks are going to be incentivized over trade routes. And yes, I do need to update the religion map. There's definitely a lot more to it than this, but I will do that and it will be done by episode 20. But speaking of episode 20, that will be releasing in a couple of days, probably in a premiere. And with that, this episode is going to conclude.